pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the minutes of our meeting in January. Is there a motion to approve those?
I'll make that motion.
A second?
No, I'm waiting for somebody to make a second because I have a comment on the minutes.
Well, I'll second them.
Okay. And discussion, my comment is you should flesh out discussion a little bit more. For example, the meeting of January 28th had a lot of comments from the attendees. And, you know, there was, I don't know who the people were speaking were. I'm sure you don't, but you could just say unidentified woman or unidentified man or something and try to include, you know, comments like that.
Okay, noted.
But to flesh them out a little bit. Yeah, okay. With that,
With those comments?
with those comments, and
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Do you want to set a meeting for June? We got town meeting. If there's something to do.
Jim, what do you think?
See how it goes over the next few weeks, and then
Okay,
if you want, we can reach out to the chair and
okay,
schedule another meeting in June.
okay.
All right, I think we should move on to all the water construction we've actually done, which is a good sign. Are you going to report on that, Roger?
I'd be happy to, sure.
Good.
So we've prepared, as is typical, just an update, a little memo that you should all have in front of you at this moment that identifies where we are with respect to the project. So I'll run through that and let me know if you'd like me to stop at any point for further discussion. But in terms of work completed to date, so we've installed just about all of the main itself, the 8-inch and the 12-inch, somewhere around 13,875 linear feet of both 8 and 12-inch water main combined. That's substantially complete, and that covers the work in Route 6, Gifford Road, Osborne, Greenwood Avenue, and East Briggs Road. The lateral installations along Route 6 are approximately 50% complete, so if you're driving down Route 6 and you see an excavator taking up part of the road, that's the work that they're doing as part of the laterals. And the laterals, of course, are intended to allow for future expansion of the water system within the town to the adjoining streets and neighborhoods. So they basically just stub out so that if the town decides to expand the water in the future, you don't have to go back into the state layout to do that. Most of the curb stops for service connections have been installed. The remaining connections along Route 6 are in progress. Preliminary lumen seed work has been completed at the service connections. Again, those service connections are the portions of the pipe network that extend from the water main up to your property line. However, I think we did want to make a note, sort of just for folks who might be listening, that the final work is not complete. Typically what we do is, contractors do is they'll, and of course, given the time of year, they would do that rough work, if you will, and then come back and then make sure that the restoration, the loom, the seeding has to go down at a certain time of year, and we're at that time now, gets done as part of the final finishes, and that would include at some point later in the season. I mean, we're thinking early fall for some of the permanent paving on the roadway, so that a lot of these roads we just mentioned are going to be overlaid and you won't see the trenches themselves at that point. In terms of just an update on the contract costs, we prepared just a consolidated budget here that identifies what we're spending the money on. As you all know, the town has realized a $4 million PFAS grant, and we've identified how those funds are going to be spent from that particular grant. The grant itself, as with some of the other funding sources, have conditions associated with them, meaning what we can spend it on and when we have to spend it by. So the following budget considers those. And so as part of the PFAS, we'll pay for the base contract, the dig it change order, items 1, 3, 6, and 7, which have been approved by the Select Board, the engineering, the resident project inspector, Fern Corp., which is my work on the project, in a small contingency. When we add those all up, that comes up to the $4 million total PFAS grant allotment. On the following page, or the back of that page, we talk a little bit about...
Roger?
Yes,
Can I
sir.
just ask a question? When it comes to contingency, is that the monies that is paid for meters and for digging from the street to the basement?
No, I think that would, we anticipate, we know that there are going to be some additional change orders on the project. For example, the culvert crossing, and that design's being finalized.
Okay, so the main contingency is that culvert crossing?
That's one of the locations where that money could be spent. Yep.
Where do the meters in the front yard digging go in?
I think the last time we spoke, we anticipated, and Mr. Hartnett could correct me, but we anticipated maybe using some of the ARPA 1286 funding for some of that.
Yeah, 1286 opera and 1295, we would expend down for those service connections.
The second
Okay.
page, the other side.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. Forgot to turn the page, sorry.
And does that answer your question, Mark? So, on the, again, on the back of the page, it identifies some of the remaining funds in the ARPA, the two ARPA funds, as Mr. Hartnett said, the 1286 and the 1295. A portion of each was used, portion of the full allotment of 1295 was used to pay change order 2, 4, 5, and 8. And in terms of those change orders, what they represent, and again, these were presented to the Select Board and approved, they represent the expansion of the water service. For example, we added East Briggs Street. That was not part of the original plan. So those costs were included there. We added, we're going to add Fifth Avenue and 6th Avenue. Those particular neighborhoods are struggling with their wells, and we saw it as an opportunity to bring water, given the budget. So those change orders include more pipe network in the system.
Question again. Does this assume that the Roderick's money is spent?
It does not, that is still available. We still have roughly $380,000
So that's in addition to the Bristol County ARPA?
in addition to the Bristol County ARPA.
Yeah, do you know what the number is, about 300?
I'd say about 375.
Okay.
Okay. In terms of schedule, so right now, as a matter of fact, going into this weekend, they're going to be pressure testing and disinfecting the portion of East Briggs, that portion of East Briggs, and then that will be followed by Route 6. The lateral and service connections work will continue through May. There's approximately 30 additional services that need to be installed along Route 6. Again, those services extend the water from the main to the businesses and the properties. We're finalizing the design work for the completion of 5th and 6th Avenue extensions, as discussed. In terms of permitting update and culvert crossing, the culvert crossing permits have been secured, so we have all we need to be able to do that work. The final design for the slip lining work is expected next week, and at that point, we'll develop, as I just noted, the change order for that work, and we'll assign a value based on that final design. So there's only really one permit that's pending, and that is for a blow-off connection at the end of the pipe run. That's near 875 State Road. And we expect to have that, within the next couple of weeks.
And Roger, that slip lining the pipe is through the old Falmouth, the old Fall River aqueduct, right?
Correct. So we're utilizing the 42-inch aqueduct.
To get onto bread and cheese?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's required a fair amount of, things like spacers. It's going to be sort of a cool engineering sort of.
Yep.
So we'll be taking myself plenty of pictures, but it's ostensibly providing both a water line that we'll be using as part of this project and a future sewer line.
Yep.
That could be used for some future connection for sewer if the town decides to move forward with that.
It's a fairly substantial crossing, right, because it's two culverts,
Yes.
and they're really about 150 feet apart, or
It's a couple hundred
a
feet.
couple hundred feet apart, so
Yeah.
the crossing underneath is significant. It's not like we're going 50 feet, it's
Yeah.
quite a distance.
No, that was a great idea, and in breaking into the pipe and then getting the water out of it and getting it slip through, that was a very good piece of work.
Yeah, and we did, I think, as you noted,
And
we did a
I have one other
due diligence.
question here.
Yeah.
I didn't know about Fifth and Sixth Avenue extensions, and I look on the map, and there are probably about 10 houses on those two places.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's that many, because a couple of them front on Osborne Street. So these aren't, when we say extensions, kind of glorified
Okay,
connections. We're not putting full 8-inch pipes down those streets. These are
okay.
stub roads off of Osborne. So we have a
But-
couple of houses.
But we're doing that to pick up a couple more houses? Have they expressed interest?
They've already signed up.
How many? Oh, they have?
I want to say,
I think we have 3 there.
Okay, good.
We had one resident in particular, I won't say who, but was really struggling with poor water quality.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was, wasn't the right thing to do just to go by and not consider, extending that water to this particular
Yeah.
person. Yeah, really bad water.
Okay, so design work is at Kleinfelder?
Yep, and it's pretty basic. We're not looking at a complex design extending a 2-inch, basically, water service down those roads.
Yeah, well, good.
So the slip lining, that's also under design. I think I talked about the blow-off connection. In terms of the residential and commercial connections, approximately 85% of the service connections to the curb stops have been completed on Gifford, Osborne, Greenwood, and East Briggs. For those property owners who submitted interest forms, early had received right-of-entry documents, and round 1 of those connection lists is expected to be finalized by the end of April. And as a reminder, we provided folks with ostensibly a questionnaire, and we asked them to let us know if there was an interest in connecting. Those folks who indicated that they did have an interest, we then worked with town council, Mr. Hartnett and I worked with town council. We finalized a right-of-entry form that allows the project to go on private properties and describe specifically the limits of the restoration that we're going to do in an effort to bring water to these residents, these early adopters who want to connect to the system. So we're still receiving requests. If you do have a request to connect, we are working with the budget, and what we're saying is if you do submit a request to connect, we're putting you on a standby list. We have had some folks, and I'll give those specific numbers in a moment here, but we have had some folks drop out. But if the budget allows and the schedule allows, it might be a consideration to provide more folks with those connections. So as of today, out of 60 properties that contacted for right of entry, those folks who initially showed some interest in connecting their properties, 30 property owners have signed and returned the right of entry forms. 3 property owners have indicated they no longer wish to participate. 5 properties are currently on the wait list pending funding being available, as discussed. The remaining 22 properties have not yet responded. So I think, just as a general sort of retrospective look at this, 30 is pretty good. I think we had hoped and for that, because as part of the connection, obviously it serves the system from a fee standpoint, but it's also good for the water quality. We want folks pulling water out of the pipe. So, in terms of connections, the Macumber School connection's been completed. So the water line is physically inside the building and ready for the plumber to undertake his work. And we did receive an estimate today from the school department of $36,450 for the internal plumbing. And then I'm estimating maybe a $1,500 charge for the existing well decommissioning. We had provided in prior meetings a status of expansion areas or consideration of expansion areas. These are areas that were outside of the contract, that depending on the bid results and funding and grants, other locations that might be considered. So that table, just the following table on page 3, just identifies those locations that we were able to tackle as part of the funding. So again, that includes 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, East Briggs, and the Plaza extension. That brings the water up to 875 State Road. And again, as part of the grant, finally, as part of the grant, one of the objectives is to get as many public water systems off the wells and onto the system. And so we've already connected Macumber School. We have the Westport Plaza. They've already indicated they're going to connect, and we're working with them. We have their right of entry forms. Maynard Street, they're going to connect. We're trying to coordinate with 875 State Road and get to the right folks so that they might connect, keeping in mind that this was, the project extended the pipe up to that property, so they weren't given a lot of notice, but we'll coordinate with them. And then the last one, I think, is Lickety Splits at 718, 719 State Road. And that's it, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay. So, Roger, that was a good report.
Good.
And it's a project that has a lot of moving parts, and it's a project that is actually an element of success for our recent efforts for water and sewer on the Route 6 corridor.
And I second that. This is a very good update, and it sort of introduces this into our next item, which is the money that we have left, or the money we will get. This on your second page of the other funding source, federal grant, which I think is this coming federal year, right?
As long as we know it's still active, we haven't heard anything otherwise, and if it is, they said, I think we can use it, they originally said 5 years, up to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We're probably down to 4, 4.5 now, but right now it's still available.
So, Bob, you had a suggestion that you shared with me, and it had to do about a small sewer project, which would be a gravity-fed project. It would not entail the second pump station at Meatworks, and it would be from Sanford Road downhill to White's. And would you like to elaborate on that thought?
My thought is we shouldn't walk away from the grant that we got. It would just be a waste of town effort to walk away from nearly $1 billion in federal. Those are hard to get, and at least for a while, Massachusetts is not likely to get more of those. So we've got that. And the question comes really, what is? I was very pleased, and I know, Jim, you were concerned about, will people sign up for the water? And now we're getting slightly more than half the people are willing to sign up. And the question comes with that $1 million or almost $1 million, do we do a small sewer project that would fit within that? Do we do more water extension? You know, that's really, it has to be spent on Route 6. So those are really the town options of what we should spend that money on.
I have a question. Does it matter if that money goes to sewage or goes to water?
No,
So it can be used either way?
right, the way the request was originally drafted was for sewer and water in Route 6. And Senator Roderick's money was for the planning, design, and management and operation of, really for the sewer number, so a lot of that went into design. But this federal grant was for either sewer or water.
And it sounded like there was a little bit of flexibility as to going slightly off Route 6
I think
with
so.
this grant as well.
Yep.
Um,
And also, there's, you know, once, because when you look at the other work that we have going on with the Climate Resilient Committee and also the Hazard Committee, now that we have public water into a public building, the Maycomb School, if you look at one of the threats that we have in a big storm is a loss of power. And if we lose our power, then we're essentially, except for the people with public water, we're, you know, people are out of their wells, you know, and if we had a real hurricane or something, if you lost your power for a couple of weeks, now, you know, we would have a real catastrophe, you know, that we need to house people. And, you know, the Maycomb School at least gives a place where you could get fresh water, they could go there, there's, you know, there's all of that kind of stuff. And the question comes, you know, would we extend water to the high school? Now you've got a real shelter. In my professional career, I was working with the town of Situate when the blizzard of '78 occurred, and you know, a significant portion of the harbor and the waterfront, the homes were destroyed, and they had most of them were not summer homes. The people lived there year-round, just like our, you know, we have a summer population, but we have, you know, most of our population is here year-round. So it's just the benefit of having this public water and the public water brought into a public space gives us some backup. And I don't, you know, if we look at what is there's some value in doing the first piece of the sewer, whether or not we acquired the White's pumping station, or we did the pumping station, and we did the gravity piece of sewer. We would have made the connection into the Fall River system. We don't have many service customers on that first piece of sewer, but it's the first it's the first critical piece in the ultimate sewer system that might be
Yeah.
there.
Well, there are a couple of commercial properties there. There's the Edgewater Apartments, who want to build a third apartment. And if our zoning won't allow it, they'll go, you know, 40 big. They built the first two, which would be a shame because Bob Carrig would rather deal with the town of Westport than the state. And then there's the, not the Watuppa Plaza, but the same owners own a smaller plaza that they would possibly redevelop. And going a little bit further, we've got, you know, Mid-City, which I think is in that area. Mid-City was sold to I think a rather dynamic entrepreneur who wants to expand his operations there, and you know, sewer would help him. And there are a couple of other, well, Meatworks we would not get to Meatworks at once sewer, but the old motel, I think, is in that area, is it not, Jim?
It's just east of Sanford Road.
Huh?
Just east of Sanford
Yeah.
Road.
Oh, okay, so that's
Back
not,
up.
Whether they could-
okay, but
whether they
Mid-City
could
is in that
pump up
area.
into that.
Yeah, that's just east of Sanford Road.
Oh, it is, okay. So really, we're down to those two commercial properties that I know about. Anyhow, there would be, some major help there. We talk about a need for housing in Westport, and I know there's a lot of pushback against development, but I've never heard a bad word about Edgewater Apartments, and it's 55 or above, and they've got a 2-year waiting list, and
No, and extending the sewer down in there, opening up the possibility to get those houses that are down along
it's Borden
along the
Street.
Southwood Upper,
Yep,
now you could get them into the sewer system. I mean, there's, I was an advocate for the sewer, and there's a lot of benefits by doing that.
well, it's right on the lake, so it end up,
Yep.
helping the health of the lake, I think. I'm sorry, pond, Watapa Pond. Up here in New England, you all call these things ponds. We call them lakes down south. Okay, well, good.
But I think that's, this coming year, those are things that we should think about. We've had even when we bid the sewer project, even though the town meeting didn't vote to allow it to go forward, we got very good bids. We're all under the engineer's estimate. We got good bids on this. So there are people, there are contractors that are interested in doing the work. And, all of that's just a very good sign.
Yeah.
If we didn't get bids, if there was no interest in doing the work, then, I certainly would not want to turn the money back, and I think, just the town administration, there was a piece in the paper about how, I think the school committee had $6 left of its ARPA money left, and I thought, that's perfect, you don't want to return that money. And there was an article in the Globe that, I think Springfield had to turn back $44 million or something.
New Bedford, 14
You think,
million in New Bedford.
yeah, 14 million in New Bedford, that they never got their projects committed, they never got, and you think, well, this is like once in a lifetime, it was meant to be recovery from an emergency. The emergency was over, like not to spend that windfall money was,
Well, in my lifetime, there's not going to be another ARPA fund. For the foreseeable future, at least this current administration, we're not going to have any more congressionally
Certainly
designated
not.
spending. And we're not going to have Senator Rodericks forever, although sometimes I hope so, but at any rate, there's $2 million there. Less the local match of 239, but we would still have 1.8 million from, the two ARPAs and the CDS.
Those ARPA funds, I think, are gonna be pretty much used up on this
Yeah,
project, right? So those are
those
gonna,
are-
The 255?
the two, yes.
yeah, those are committed, right?
I think those are pretty much committed.
Oh, okay, so they shouldn't be there, okay,
They're not under contract yet, but
okay,
still waiting for some change orders on
okay,
Route 6 crossing. We're looking at some additional patching to improve what's out there, which will be a little bit more. And
Okay.
we're looking to add as many services as we can. So it's mainly the federal grant that isn't accounted for, and there may be some remaining funds left with Senator Rodericks.
yeah, okay.
We just got that extended for a couple of years, so that's still viable.
So this is,
It's north of $1 million that is meant to be spent on infrastructure in the north end of town.
Yes.
And the only issue with the federal grant is we need a 20% match, right? And you can't use state grants. We need
But we
town
can
money.
use free cash.
We can use free cash if it's appropriated and approved at town meeting, yep.
Yeah.
And, you know, that may be one way to look at this, if we can get through this existing project and get some positive feedback from it when we're done with, and we see positive feedback, so you don't always see it outside of town hall, but we receive calls, say, on a regular basis, asking when they're gonna be able to tie into the water, because their wells are that bad that they need more.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
You know, we have at least 30 people that wanna tie in right now because their wells are bad.
Mm-hmm.
And we have others that are just off the system or just outside the limits of what we put in that have already requested to be tied in. We had a call from First Ave last week. We had a gentleman come in on Briggs Road between Route 88 and Gifford Road that's looking to do 3 connections, but he's just outside the area.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as this thing gets done, we're gonna see, hopefully see a little bit more interest in people wanting to tie in. And then, you know, a decision's gonna have to be made, you know, do you put the money towards sewer, do you know, put it towards water, and what are the benefits and pitfalls to both?
And we're sure we can use the CDS grant for connecting to the water line in the neighborhoods.
It sounds like, yes, we can, it's like Route 6 and vicinity.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah.
So from a political standpoint, it might be easier to sell the local match to town meeting for borderline extension. Although it's possible, you know, if we could put this little piece of sewer in, we could sell it as, you know, we have most of the money, and it's very small project, and we're never going to get this money again in my lifetime. I will say that, you know. Bob, you might join me there. So, you know, it's kind of now or never. But politically, I think it would be an easier sell to extend the water line into more neighborhoods, more streets. But what do you all think?
I think one of the things that would be helpful to advise the selectmen is, Roger, if we could look at what we think that sewer piece would cost. You say, okay, out of, you know, we had very good bids a year ago. If we just did that piece, let's take because we have a couple of good commercial places in there. There's the plaza with the pizza place and those, and also the benefit of being able to get into Borden Street and extend out there. So, and I would say, we put the pumping station in that, you know, if we said,
Whites.
okay, if we
Yeah.
did the pumping station and the sewer, what would that be?
Well, we already own the piece of land there for, what was the price, $40,000?
Yeah, it was around 40,000.
Yep.
Why don't we,
So this.
I think you've got a very good idea to advise the select board on what we're talking about here, because we were created by the select board to make recommendations to them.
That's right, that's what our job is to advise.
That's what our job is. So I think we could put together a motion with your sewer idea, and we'll start it with, you know, this money that's use it or lose it, and we're never going to get it again. And then talk about the sewer project, or a water line extension.
Right.
I
so-
think we should propose those two things. Does that sound right, reasonable, Bob?
Well, we should, first of all, figure out, I mean, if we thought that piece of sewer was $2 million, then we think, we don't have $2 million. Okay, so, you know, find out what does it cost. If we thought the cost was in the order of magnitude of under $1 million, that gives us an option. Even if it was around $1 million, with other funds, we could, if it was $1.2 million or something, we could do that.
We've got 1.2 million plus 375 from Roderick's. We have almost 1.6 million.
Yeah,
Call it 1.5 million, just to be conservative.
so let's, I think one of the things that we could do and report back at our next meeting is, what do we think in today's cost that sewer would cost?
Okay.
And then we know what we're, you've got all the running, the linear pipe cost.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
say, okay, we've got 1.5 million. Where should we, do we extend in Route 6, we reach into new neighborhoods? Let's look at the, up in the old,
Yeah.
those areas.
To have an accurate number, don't we have to put up the bid?
Oh, yeah, we'd have to put it out to bid.
So I think that's probably will be the first step, correct?
Well, we have the bid numbers that we can then develop the estimate off of, which should be, and then maybe put a little escalation in there, but.
Yeah.
So we have what they already bid that we can look at.
That bid is what, a year old?
The sewer bid is a year old, the water bid is a few months old. We bid that in January?
We can look at recent bids too for other communities and just make sure we're still in the same ballpark.
So it's an idea to see, all right, before we advise the select board, we can tell them, this is what the money would buy.
Yeah.
And then we can decide as a committee, what do we
So-
think our recommendation was?
So, East Briggs Road cost what? Was it 350 or something? What?
Paved, it's
Huh?
400, and with an overlay, it's $453,000.
So East Briggs was 450. And so we could do 4 East Briggs. Well, no, maybe 3.5 East Briggs. East Briggs had 26 houses. It would be someplace in the 90 to 100, 80 to 100 houses that we could serve.
Yeah, so I think, Roger, we can come up with some pretty reasonable estimates, one on what the pump station would cost based on the previous bid, what the gravity sewer up to
Yep.
Sanford Road would cost.
Can you do that, Roger?
Oh, yeah. It's
Okay.
not-
And
this
then-
is
So you could,
not a heavy-
Then we would also need to take a look at the properties abutting that gravity sewer and
Right,
what
what are they,
what their payment per year would be, and see how that compares to the average cost of operating the pump station a year.
yeah.
You know, if the pump station costs 50,000 a year and we're only bringing in 5,000,
Well, that's another, yeah,
you know,
that's
we
a
wanna
problem.
make sure we know
Yeah.
that ahead of time, whereas the water, if we extend the water, we're really not charging, you know, we're not paying much in service costs, right? So,
that's right, you
Yeah,
don't have
right,
Yeah, those
okay, yes,
things.
okay, you're right, that's a
Fall
good
River's
point.
operating the water system.
yep,
Mhm.
and then we can do the same thing with water, Roger has a per price per 8-inch line and 12-inch line roughly per linear foot, and we can get an idea of how many feet we can do.
So, we're not ready to go to the select board yet, but you can work on the sewer project and the,
Yep,
good, and you could come up with a very educated guess, I would assume.
yep, that's, not that dissimilar to what we have on
That's what you
page
do.
3. I think it's where we have all the different locations where we've
Yeah,
identified.
If you look in the rear, we did look at when this board decided to do East Briggs, we had looked at a bunch of other neighborhoods.
Yep,
Well, Jim, you did a real study, because I know you gave us a number of options, and, well, there's still some options here. But an Oakland Loop with 24 houses, a Pine Tree Loop with 13 houses, a Faulkner Loop with 12 houses. And loops are good, I know.
Yeah,
So we already, you've already got the neighborhood selected almost, where the, the best loops would be. Okay.
so,
Well, that brings up, an upcoming meeting, just to, I know we mentioned June, but we could have a meeting, in the third week of May to discuss this topic.
after town meeting?
No, after, you said after town meeting, yes,
I did say after town.
yes.
The only thing I would mention is that I think we'll have a better idea as to where we stand with funding on our existing contracts in another, maybe by the end of May.
End of
We'll have
May.
the change orders for the crossing. We will have a better idea of how many customers are gonna wanna tie
Okay.
in and what those actual costs are per time.
So that would argue for June.
I would say June, yeah.
Because nothing that we're talking about now is gonna get in this year's town meeting. That's,
No.
warrant's
Right.
closed, right?
Right, okay.
So,
Yes.
so I think it's
So it
really-
doesn't matter, okay, good point,
It's really,
okay.
particularly wrapping up the contracts we have now
Mm-hmm.
and getting that stuff done, and then we should meet, this time in June.
Okay. While we're on the subject, let's just. So today's the third Wednesday. So we're looking at Wednesday, June 18th. Wednesday, June 18th.
As a tentative date? Yeah.
Wednesday, June 18th.
I can do that. Is that okay with folks?
Yep. Okay.
June 18th, here at 6:30.
6:30, yes.
And Roger, you'd be able to have that report to us before then?
Yeah.
Okay,
Can I have you both? Yep, certainly.
I think that brings us to the issue that you had raised today in an email about the Water Enterprise Fund. Do you want-
Yes,
walk us
we
through that?
we put on the agenda a discussion of the rates of our current water line. And this came about because Jim Hartnett went before the Select Board, when was it, in February or early March or
March, early
something?
March 14th.
Saying that the water line was running a deficit of about $60,000, and that we really need to increase rates. And he made a proposal, and it was not passed by the Board of Selectmen. So I volunteered to work with him. I've done this before on rates. When we had the old Water Resource Management Committee. We lowered rates then, actually. It was a much more friendly environment because, just a little bit of history here, back in 2015, we were faced with polluted water and the need for a filtration system that I remember was going to cost like $800,000. So at that time, the Board of Selectmen basically doubled the water rate from $4.40 to $8.80. And we collected at $8.80 for several years, and we built up a big cushion. We'd always carried about a $100,000 or $150,000 cushion in the Water Enterprise Fund. So our water utilities run as an enterprise fund. You all know that, I think. So they raised it to $8.80, and the rates stood there, and then it was determined we did not need the filtration system, that blowouts could handle the level of carcinogen in the water to an acceptable level. So I remember working with Michael Sullivan, and we lowered the rates from $8.80, 20%, down to $7.04. And all this was done not really recognizing the fact that the Board of Selectmen at the time had a policy. And here it is, public notice, effective March 1st, 2003, that new water rate is 15% per cubic feet above what Fall River charges Westport. And so this was a policy that was followed, but once the Board of Selectmen doubled those rates and backed them down 20%, this 15% premium was never an issue. And since then, one time the water rates, I don't know the date, were raised from $7.04 to $7.28, but they stand now at $7.28. And Fall River is now charging us $7.21. So we've got basically 7 cents per cubic feet. No, I mean per 100 cubic feet to cover the operating costs and to keep the reserve, the enterprise fund liquid. And Jim estimates that operating costs are about $50,000 a year. There are $35,000 in direct costs and then another $15,000 in indirect costs. So that's got to be covered, and it's not being covered. Now, we are lucky in that we don't have any debt, because usually a utility has the commodity to cover, the operation to cover, and then the capital cost to cover. But we have, this was all done on grants, and so we have no capital costs. We don't have, a $10 million loan that we have to service. So we're lucky there. But still, we are not having we're not doing two things. We're not covering our costs, and we're not following this policy. So in order to cover our costs and to follow this policy, we can take the 721 and add a 15% premium, and that gets us up to $8.30 per CCF. And that's what this memo is really all about, to talk to you all tonight about making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. They are the water commissioners of our town. For this body to make a recommendation on the water rate starting July 1st. We're on a fiscal year, and the bills have already gone out for this current quarter, the April, May, June quarter. But I personally believe that we should recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we raise the rate. Now, it's a 14% boost from $7.21 up to $8.30. But just to put this into perspective, we did have an $8.80 rate for 3 years, okay? And so the $8.30 is not a rate that's unheard of in this town. And the second thing is, if you adjust that for inflation, the old $8.80 rate would be $11.85 today. So this is not a rate that is that our ratepayers are not used to. I will say it's much above Fall River. They have a $4.24 rate to their own residents. And that's pretty comparable to New Bedford. I haven't seen a New Bedford rate in a couple years, but I think New Bedford's pretty similar. But they own systems. We don't. They own water treatment systems, and we don't. So we are a rate taker there. I put it all into a financial model showing the need. I've just given the words. Here are the numbers. I've given some of the numbers as I've spoken. But $8.30 would still mean a slight deficit of $4,000. But this is a forecast for fiscal 26, starting July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. There are a lot of variables in play at the moment. And I don't know if you wanted to talk about the current negotiations underway with Fall River, but because you've been doing those.
Yes, so right now, we're working off an old agreement that was approved in 2013 with Fall River, and it was a 10-year agreement, and it goes year to year now, until we get a new agreement with Fall River. A new agreement with Fall River has not been finalized. We've had some initial discussions. We're hopeful that our agreement will be similar to what other communities have, like Tiverton and Freetown, where we pay 55% above the Fall River rate as opposed to 70%, which would benefit us, and also 5% after we reach a certain number, hopefully around 26,000 CCF a year, which means our existing customers, our existing usage is around 24 to 27,000 a year. So these new customers, their usage would actually be billed at a lesser amount.
It'll bring down the cost.
That kind of gets us, but again, it still has to be approved by the City of Fall River and the Select Board. So until that's done, we're still a little bit in flux. We have the other mediation that we've gone through on past billing that we're getting close, hopefully getting close to finalizing. I think the town of Westport's okay, I think Fall River's still working through it, but hopefully that's resolved soon, and that's gonna eat up some of our excess funds in the enterprise. The reserves will be roughly 145,000 of the reserves will go towards that mediation settlement. The remainder will come from ARPA funds that we put aside for that. I will say, with the rate, proposed rate of $8.30, when we had our meeting with the neighborhood at the Macumber School back in January, we had stated that the rates would be around $8.29, so we're a penny off. So what we presented to the community is what essentially we'd be presenting to the select board on.
And when I did my model, I rounded up a little bit, but it was just a penny. So if you think, 14% is too much on July 1st, we could do, it's called rate design. We could cut it, the rates, we could increase 7% on July 1st and then maybe 7% on January 1st. That's a possibility. These are, the other thing is, I think we have proven that, if that 830 is too much with a lot of if the negotiations with Fall River come in, very favorably, then perhaps we could actually lower it. We have lowered it. I personally worked with Michael Sullivan lowering the water rate back in 2018, 20%. And so it can be done. You might say, oh, rates only go up, they never go down. Not here in Westport. They actually went down.
And not to get too deep into it, but we're paying Fall River $7.21 for each CCF that we use here in town. We're billing our customers $7.28, so a 7-cent difference. The issue is that with any system, there's water loss, unaccounted for water. And, that can range anywhere from 10 to 20%. We want to get it under 10, we eventually want to get it down around 5, but we're still working to do that. So that unaccounted for water that we're paying Fall River for, but not billing our customers, has to be made up in the rates as well.
Yeah, that's in the model. That's a very, very good point. And maybe, we just posted the town engineer position on Monday, and I know that we probably won't get a town engineer who's a licensed water quality operator, but we could still maybe have a town engineer look for leaks, because this unbilled number, and it amounts to like 45,000, what was the number?
4,500 CCF.
4,500 CCF, yeah. So,
And that fluctuates year to year.
yeah,
It doesn't take much. You could have a leaky hydrant that's leaking 24 hours a day that can
yeah,
add up, right? So
Yep.
we're going through those procedures as well. We had a meeting last week with Linda Carrera, water operator in the highway department, and we have a company that comes in and flushes our hydrants, and they do reporting on each hydrant that they open to flush. So we're kind of updating that reporting process so that
yeah.
we get better reports if there is something that, the hydrant's not, if it's stuck, if it's, they notice any leaks or any issues, it's identified right away, so we can address it right away and reduce any of these other issues.
Yeah. Okay, so 4,500 times 7.21 is $32,000 worth of water that we have to pay for, but that is unbilled. And, we need a rate increase to cover that on the one hand, but also we have to, Jim has, operations in place to hopefully reduce that water loss.
And again, that's not uncommon. Every system has.
Yes.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, you can't have 100% tight water system.
No, but we're losing, what, you said 15 to 20%?
So,
State standard is to have water systems in the 10%, their unaccounted for water is in the 10% range.
Yeah.
That's the state standard.
so
Okay.
when we do our reporting with the state, we're actually 5% or under. But that takes into account the water that we're blowing off of the
Blowing,
meters. So
right.
when we deduct that, that's a big number. So that amount that's unaccounted for, if we just percentage-wise to the customers, it's a bigger number. But overall, our system, they're looking at our system and saying, hey, that's functioning good. You're only losing 4 or 5% of your water, which is ideal.
Very good.
But When you take into consideration the blow-off meters, then it looks different, and we need to
But we
address it.
metered that water, we know how much we're,
We do, yeah.
So what I would like to do is to make a motion and then have somebody second it and then to move into the discussion phase and get the comments from all of you. So I would like to make a motion to increase the Water Enterprise Fund rate from $7.28 per CCF to $8.30 per CCF.
Second.
Okay.
all right, discussion on the motion. I had one, a couple of thoughts when I saw this, and this is a nice piece of work, Marty.
Thank you.
And the first thought is, we should try to run an enterprise fund so it actually pays for itself. I mean, the whole idea of an enterprise fund is that they're not coming out of our enterprise funds, they're not coming out of our tax levy. They're supposed to operate themselves. And the second thought was, if we're going to raise the rates, it's better to do this now than have people connect. Now we're connecting a bunch of people and then say, after they connect, say, oh, by the way, we're gonna raise your rate. Particularly since the 830 is very consistent with what we told the people, these people that we're now connecting, we told them it was gonna be around this rate. So we're consistent with what we told the public. So
Okay.
and I think that just the fairness out of, if you're going to raise the rates, do it before people are connecting so they know what their,
Yeah, okay.
what their experience is likely to be.
Bob, would you come with me to the Board of Selectmen meeting to say things
Sure.
like that?
Yes. Do you, Jim, you're the town administrator, and I know that you had recommended to them to raise the rates.
I did, I think the timing was bad, and I think I could have presented it a little better. I thought it was gonna be easier than it was, and, like I said, we're still, I think, working with Fall River on the agreement and working on past billing. I just think the timing was off, so I think if they get a recommendation from this committee, it would go a long way.
Okay. Is there more discussion then? Anybody?
I'm finished. I made a motion, Joe has seconded it, you've made comments. The floor is still open for Evan and Joe and Duncan.
I guess, the only thing I would say is, while we're still waiting to hear back from Fall River, will that change that amount any? To be swayed one way or the
It
other?
really shouldn't, it may be a penny or two, it's not dramatic. And we're cutting it close with the $8.30, so if Fall River's rates come in, from what I understand, they didn't raise their rates as of July 1st at their last meeting.
Yeah, they had a meeting earlier in this week, and they kept it flat at 424. Yep.
So that'll help a little bit.
Yes, that
And then
did
if we
help.
get a new agreement, that'll help a little bit too, but, it's a 15% difference. It's not dramatic, so I don't see it going down to 820 or 815. I think we're gonna be right around 830. And if by chance we have a little, next year, you don't have to do the raise if it works.
Jimmy, if the price rises with Fall River a little bit with the new negotiations, we would have to take another vote to raise it a little bit, right?
It's not going to change for a year, because
year.
they just set their rates for the next year.
And with Maury's motion, it leaves us a little tiny something to start building up the stabilization, right?
Well, we not build up the stabilization,
I
we
mean,
want to
we need
stabilize the
We need
stabilization.
something to work with.
Because we've got a little over
Haven't had.
300, we're going to pay about 150 for this settlement with Fall River.
So we should have roughly
140.
about 100 plus in the stabilization account, or the enterprise fund.
Right, that we
after
haven't
this
had in the
fiscal year.
past. We've been,
We've actually had, we've had 350 we've been carrying for years.
but I
Last year,
mean,
we.
you were talking about some figures, and you said you need 50,000 to operate, and you weren't meeting that. That's why we needed to raise it a little, right? Basically?
I don't think, so we have, in addition to what we pay Fall River, we have our own operating costs, right? Like, you know,
Right.
if fire hydrant gets hit, we gotta replace it. We have our water operator that we pay
Well,
monthly.
you said we weren't quite meeting it. We weren't meeting it.
We're running a deficit this year. We're running a deficit of maybe close to $60,000 this year. So this rate will get us pretty much even. Depending on how we do with Fall River, maybe next year we don't increase it. If Fall River doesn't, you know, if negotiations don't go as well as we like.
And that's why we need to raise it a little bit, so we can operate efficiently.
Yeah.
Joe, here are the 35,000 of direct costs.
I mean, I remember the Westport Town meeting
Yeah.
where, you know, you said your taxes were, you'd be barely covering things. We can't run water and sewer like that.
No, and there's no money in the operating budget to supplement the enterprise fund.
Right.
So we gotta get it up to even, and like I said, this is what was presented to the people that are tying in a couple of months ago, so it's, yeah.
Any further discussion?
Are we playing safe by knowing that we cannot change the rates in 1 year by going to the rates that you guys are proposing?
So we may run a slight deficit next year, but it would be slight. We would have enough in the enterprise to cover that without significantly impacting that. And there's a lot of variables, right? We don't know how many people are actually gonna tie in and what their water usage is gonna be. You know, we have the school, we have a couple of plazas. If they're fairly decent water users, then that will offset some of the.
And.
In your understanding, you were probably doing the best by sticking to that rate.
Yeah. You know,
We could-
I'm conservative. I'd love to go higher, but I think in fairness to the people that are tying in, this is what we presented to them. I think that's.
Yeah.
And it's also consistent with what the select board approved, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that it's roughly 15% above Fall River's rate. So I think that's a good place to start.
In the benefit, not only the benefit to the town of having an enterprise fund that is in balance or pays for itself, is that the more users that we connect, the more water we don't have to spill. Because we have to take this water out now because our water sits in the pipeline and it ages and the water quality goes down. And the state won't let us sell water that's stagnant in the pipeline. It really isn't a health risk, but it's a taste and odor risk. So we end up, the more users that we have, the less water we have to buy and spill on the ground.
Right.
So, you know, that really argues for, you know, let's extend the water system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If there's no other comment, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Is
opposed?
that,
That's
good.
unanimous.
okay.
And
So,
we should,
just as a procedural thing, Bob and Jim, we should bring this to the Board of Selectmen.
right,
I think,
Get an
should,
agenda.
before town meeting or after town meeting? Well, you need to start sending out bills, so
We send those out July, I think, so we got a little time.
you send July bills out in July?
We read the end of June and we send them out.
Okay, so we could actually
That's right?
go before the Board of Selectmen and.
Evan does the
after-
reading, so I'm asking. Yeah.
Because I just read 3 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
the end of March.
Yeah.
Yeah, middle.
So that would.
So we could go after town meeting.
Yeah, I would say the first or second meeting in May. I can talk
Okay,
to the chair
sec-
and see
okay.
when she'd like it on the agenda. Yeah, and if we could wait maybe a week or two, and the second meeting in May, maybe we have some more answers from Fall River too, that would just
Right, okay.
analyze things a little bit.
So we'll do that in a month. Monday nights, Bob, are you available Monday nights?
I am.
Okay, good. So we have a plan. Good.
That's the agenda. Is there any further business, any discussion? You had presented this to Swansea upgrading their meters and stuff.
Just so the board members could take it home with them, look at it, something to, I feel Swansea's done similar things to what we're trying to do.
Yeah?
And they've been very successful. So I've been keeping tabs at it, so maybe we can follow the lead when it comes time.
Great, thanks. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Okay.